The throne room of Zenther Prime glowed with the light of 1,000 floating crystals. And Emperor Vaxtulos, 13, sat upon his ancient seat of power with the confidence of a ruler who had never known defeat. His empire stretched across 3 galactic arms, covering more than 12,000 conquered worlds. And for 12 millennia, no species had ever challenged the might of the Zentharian people. The War Council gathered before him in their ceremonial armor, their scaled faces showing nothing but pride and certainty as holographic displays showed the latest reports from the edges of their territory. Grand Admiral Dexnor stepped forward and bowed deeply before his emperor, his forearms crossing over his chest in the traditional gesture of respect. "My lord," he said in a voice that echoed through the crystal chamber, "our scout probes have returned from the Orion Spur with most interesting news." The holographic display changed to show a small yellow star surrounded by 8 planets, and Dexner pointed one clawed finger at the third world from the sun. "This planet, which the natives call Earth, shows signs of industrial civilization," he explained. And the council members leaned forward with interest. "Our probes detected primitive nuclear fission technology, chemical rocket propulsion, and electromagnetic communications that leak into space like the babbling of children." Emperor Vaxtulos stroked his chin with one of his upper hands and studied the blue and green world spinning slowly in the display. "What is their development level?" he asked, and his voice carried the weight of absolute authority. "Approximately 0.7 on the Kardashev scale." "My lord," Dexner answered with a hint of amusement in his tone, "they have not even achieved fusion power or basic faster than light travel. And their species appears to be divided into hundreds of competing nations that war among themselves constantly." Laughter rippled through the War Council, and several of the admirals shook their heads at the foolishness of such a primitive species. "They sound like the Velox were before we conquered them," said Admiral Crickstill from his position near the back. "Divided and weak and ripe for subjugation, Emperor." Vaxtulos nodded slowly and felt the familiar thrill of expansion stirring in his ancient heart. "What strategic value does this world hold?" he asked, and Dexner pulled up another display showing trade routes and military positions. "Terra sits at a perfect location for staging further expansion into the galactic rim." "My lord," the Grand Admiral explained, "its star system contains abundant resources, and the native population would provide excellent labor for our mining operations." The decision formed in the Emperor's mind with the ease of long practice, and he raised one hand to signal his judgment. "Grand Admiral Dexner, you will take the 7th subjugation fleet to this Terra and bring it under our control," he commanded. "I give you 3 orbital cycles to complete the conquest and establish our presence." Dexner bowed again with barely contained excitement, for even a simple conquest meant glory and advancement in the ranks. "It shall be done, my Emperor," he said. "The humans will kneel before the might of Zenther, or they will be destroyed." The council chamber erupted in cheers of approval, and not one voice raised any concern about the mission after all. They had done this thousands of times before, and primitive species always fell the same way 3 days later. Grand Admiral Dexner stood on the bridge of the Eternal Dominion and watched his fleet assemble in the space above. Zenther Prime, the Dreadnought-class command ship, stretched 5 kilometers from bow to stern, bristling with weapons that could crack continents and shields that could withstand nuclear bombardment. Around it gathered 846 other warships of various classes, from sleek destroyers to massive troop carriers filled with soldiers eager for battle. "All ships report ready for departure, Grand Admiral," said his communications officer, a young female named Velsa, who had proven herself in 3 previous campaigns. Dexner settled into his command chair and allowed himself a moment of satisfaction as he surveyed his mighty fleet. "Signal all vessels to enter. Faster than light travel on my mark." he ordered. Course is set for the Sol system, and we will arrive in approximately 3 weeks. He activated the ship-wide communication system and addressed his crew with the confidence of a predator about to hunt helpless prey. Warriors of the Seventh Fleet, he declared, we sailed today to claim another world for the glory of our Emperor and our people. The humans of Terra are a weak and divided species who have never faced true power. And when they see our fleet darken their skies, they will have no choice but to surrender. This will be an easy conquest, my friends. I promise you all that we will be home before the next season cycle with another victory to add to our records. Cheers echoed through every ship in the fleet, and Dexner felt the vibration of the gravity drives powering up beneath his feet. All ships, engage faster than light travel now, he commanded. And space itself seemed to fold around the Armada stars, stretched into lines of light. And then the fleet vanished from Xantharian space, racing toward a distant yellow sun and the unsuspecting world that orbited it in his private quarters that evening. Dexner sat at his desk and composed the standard surrender ultimatum that he would broadcast to the humans upon arrival. The document was the same one the Xantharian Empire had used for millennia, translated into every known language and updated only to include the name of each new target species. To the leaders of Terra, it began, you are hereby commanded to surrender your world and your people to the eternal glory of the Xantharian Empire. Resistance is not advised, as your primitive weapons cannot harm our vessels, and any attempt to fight will result in the destruction of your cities and the deaths of billions. Submit peacefully, and your people will be allowed to live as subjects of our great Emperor, serving the Empire in whatever capacity we deem appropriate. You have 1 orbital cycle to respond with your unconditional surrender, or we will begin orbital bombardment of your population centers. Dexner read over the document and nodded with satisfaction before saving it to his personal files. He had delivered this ultimatum to 17 species during his career, and every single one had eventually surrendered. Some had fought briefly, their primitive weapons splashing harmlessly against Xantharian shields, but all had learned the futility of resistance. In the end, the Grand Admiral poured himself a glass of ceremonial wine and raised it toward the viewport, where stars streaked past in brilliant lines. 2. Another easy victory, he said to himself, and he drank deeply without any doubt in his heart in the crew quarters throughout the fleet. Soldiers and officers gathered to share stories and place bets on how quickly the humans would surrender. I give them 2 hours after they see us, laughed a weapons officer named Draxel. 1 look at the Eternal Dominion, and they will be begging to serve us. I think they might last a full day, countered his friend Nexter. The truly primitive ones sometimes take longer to understand what they are facing. None of them imagined for even a moment that outcome might be different. From every conquest before, none of them suspected that the humans had been watching them approach from the moment the scout probes entered their system, and none of them knew that they were not sailing toward a conquest, but toward their own complete and total annihilation. The 7th Subjugation Fleet raced through folded space toward Earth. 847 ships filled with confident warriors who had never lost a battle. They would arrive in 3 weeks, and they expected to find a frightened primitive species ready to bow before superior power. They could not have been more wrong. Deep beneath the mountains of Colorado, in a facility that officially did not exist, Director General Sarah Chun stood before the largest holographic display on Earth and watched 847 red dots moving slowly toward her world. The United Earth Defense Command had been tracking the Xantharian fleet from the moment it entered faster than light travel, and every step of their journey was monitored by sensors that the aliens could not even imagine. They will arrive in 18 days, reported Admiral James Morrison. the commander of Earth's first battle fleet, right on schedule. Just as our calculations predicted. Sarah Chun nodded slowly and felt a cold smile forming on her lips as she studied the enemy formation. And they still have no idea what they are flying into, she said. Their scout probes saw exactly what we wanted them to see. And now they think they are coming to conquer a primitive world. The officers gathered in the command center exchanged knowing looks, for they all understood the truth that the rest of the galaxy had never discovered humanity was not primitive at all 40 years ago. A team of physicists working in secret had cracked the fundamental equations of faster-than-light travel. And everything had changed. The governments of Earth had faced a choice: reveal their discovery to the galaxy and invite the attention of older and potentially hostile civilizations, or hide their true capabilities and let the universe believe that humans were still a young and harmless species they had chosen to hide. And that decision had shaped everything that followed. Show me the current status of our defensive forces, Director Chung commanded. And the holographic display shifted to show the Sol system in stunning detail. Thousands of green dots appeared throughout the system, from the outer reaches of the Kuiper Belt to the orbital platforms circling Earth itself. The 1st through 5th battle fleets are positioned in stealth mode throughout the outer system. Admiral Morrison explained. Each fleet contains 400 vessels equipped with our latest weapons and propulsion systems. The orbital defense grid has been fully powered up for the first time since its construction. And all 10,000 platforms are showing green status. Temporal mines have been seeded along every possible approach vector. And our null space fighter squadrons are standing by for immediate deployment. Sarah Chun walked closer to the display and examined the positions of her forces with the careful eye of a woman who had spent 30 years preparing for this exact moment. What about the masquerade? She asked. Are we maintaining the appearance of a primitive civilization? Yes, Director, answered Colonel Lisa Park, the head of Earth's Counterintelligence Division. All visible space activity continues to use chemical rockets and nuclear power. Our communication satellites are broadcasting normal electromagnetic chatter. And the International Space Station is performing its regular orbit with a crew who genuinely believe they represent humanity's most advanced space technology. To any outside observer, Earth looks exactly like a fractured world full of primitive nations, fighting among themselves. The deception had been humanity's greatest weapon for 4 decades. And it was about to pay off in ways the Xantharians could never anticipate. Director Chun turned to face the assembled officers and spoke with quiet intensity in her voice. Ladies and gentlemen, we have war-gamed this scenario 1,000 times. And we all know what we are capable of. The Xantharian Empire believes they are sending a mid-level fleet to conquer a helpless world. But they are actually walking into the most carefully prepared, trapping galactic history. Our weapons operate on principles their scientists have not even theorized about. And our ships can do things their commanders cannot imagine. When this fleet arrives, we will not just defeat them. We will erase them so completely that their empire will fear to speak our name for the next 1,000 years. Admiral Morrison stepped forward with a tactical display showing detailed analysis of the approaching enemy fleet. Director, I recommend a multi-phase engagement designed for maximum shock value, he said. Our goal should not just be destruction, but total psychological devastation. If we simply destroy them, the Xantharians might convince themselves it was a fluke and send a larger fleet. But if we annihilate them in seconds, using weapons they cannot comprehend, against which they have no defense, then we send a message that will echo across the entire galaxy. Sarah Chun considered his words carefully, for she understood that this battle would define humanity's relationship with the cosmos for generations to come. Agreed, she said finally. We will give them exactly 30 seconds to retreat after we reveal ourselves. When they refuse, we will demonstrate such overwhelming power that no species in this galaxy will ever consider threatening Earth again. She activated a secure communication channel that connected her to every military commander on the planet and in space. "This is Director Chun to all UEDC forces," she announced. "The moment we have prepared for has arrived. In 18 days, an alien fleet will enter our system expecting to find frightened primitives ready to surrender. Instead, they will find humanity waiting for them with weapons that will rewrite their understanding of what is possible. All units are to maintain stealth protocols until my command. And then we will show the Xantharians and everyone watching that Earth is not prey. We are the apex predator. And we have simply been waiting for something foolish enough to enter our territory." Across the solar system, thousands of ships powered up their weapons in silence while their crews prepared for humanity's first true battle against an alien empire on the dark side of the moon. Massive doors opened to reveal launch bays filled with fighters that can phase in and out of normal space in the asteroid belt. Platforms disguised as mining operations revealed the true nature of their cargo. Antimatter torpedoes with enough destructive power to crack planets, and, in Earth orbit, the 10,000 satellites that the world believed were communications and weather stations began charging weapons that drew power directly from fusion reactors hidden in their cores. Director Chun returned her attention to the approaching fleet and felt a fierce pride swelling. In her chest, the Xantharians had conquered thousands of worlds because those worlds had been exactly what they appeared to be, but humanity had learned the oldest lesson in nature. The most dangerous predator is the one that does not look dangerous for 40 years. Earth had worn the mask of a primitive, divided, helpless world now that mask was about to come off, and the galaxy would finally see what lurked beneath. 18 days, Sarah Chun said quietly to herself as she watched the red dots creeping closer. 18 days until we change everything. She thought about all the species the Xantharians had conquered, all the civilizations that had been crushed beneath their boots, because they could not defend themselves. Would not join that list Earth would become the nightmare that made empires tremble, and the 847 ships racing toward the Sol system had no idea that they were not flying toward a conquest, they were flying toward their deaths. And they would not even understand what killed them until it was far too late. The trap was set. The hunters were in position, and all that remained was for the prey to arrive. The 7th subjugation fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Sol system, and Grand Admiral Dexner felt a moment of triumph as he gazed upon his target for the first time. The yellow sun burned brightly in the distance, and somewhere in that light was the small blue world called Earth that would soon belong to the Xantharian Empire. "All ships reporting successful arrival," announced Valsa from her communications station. "The fleet is in perfect formation and ready for conquest." Dexner nodded with satisfaction and ordered the fleet to begin its approach toward the inner system at standard invasion speed, but even as he gave the command, something nagged at the edge of his awareness. His sensor officer, a veteran named Drekmer who had served in 20 campaigns, was staring at his display with a troubled expression. "Grand Admiral," Drekmer said slowly, "I am detecting anomalies in the readings around Terra." "What kind of anomalies?" Dexner asked, and a tiny seed of unease planted itself in his stomach. "There appears to be far more orbital infrastructure than our probes reported," Drekmer answered. "I am counting over 10,000 satellites in various orbits, and their energy signatures are inconsistent with primitive technology." Dexner walked to the sensor station and examined the readings himself, and the seed of unease began to grow. The scout probes had reported a few hundred satellites at most, simple machines for communication and weather observation, but what he saw now suggested something far more advanced before he could order a deeper scan. His communications officer gasped and nearly dropped her headset. "Grand Admiral," Valsa said with fear creeping into her voice, "we are receiving a transmission from the planet, and it is in perfect Zentarian." The bridge fell silent as the message played through the speakers, and every officer felt their blood run cold. "You have violated the territory of the United Earth Defense Command," the human voice said calmly. "You have one opportunity to retreat beyond the heliopause. You have 30 seconds to comply." Vexner stared at the speaker in disbelief. And then he began to laugh. "They dare threaten us?" He roared with more confidence than he felt. "A primitive species with chemical rockets dares to give ultimatums to the Seventh Fleet." He activated his own communication system and broadcast his prepared surrender demand to the planet below, people of Terra. He declared, "You are being offered one chance to submit peacefully to the Zentarian Empire. Your pathetic threats mean nothing to us. And if you do not surrender immediately, we will begin the destruction of your cities." The countdown reached 0, and the humans did not retreat instead. Something far worse happened. Space itself seemed to tear open at dozens of points throughout the Zentarian formation. And ships appeared from nowhere. They were small, sleek, and they moved in ways that should have been impossible, phasing in and out of reality like ghosts. "What in the name of the ancestors?" Drekmer screamed as his sensors went haywire. "I am detecting vessels inside our formation that were not there a second ago." The null space fires struck before anyone could react. Each tiny ship released a pulse of energy that looked like a ripple in space itself. And wherever those ripples touched, matter simply ceased to exist. 70 Xantharian destroyers and frigates vanished in the span of a heartbeat. Not exploding but dissolving into clouds of particles that had been weapons and armor and living beings. Just moments before 4 seconds had passed. All ships, scatter and activate defensive shields. Vexner screamed into his communicator, "Return fire on those fighters immediately." But the human vessels had already phased out of normal space, and there was nothing left to shoot at. The fleet began to break formation, ships veering in every direction, as their captains tried to escape whatever horror had just killed 70 of their comrades. And then the temporal minds activated Thex. Nor watched in horror as 300 of his ships suddenly began to flicker like bad holographic recordings. They existed and did not exist at the same time. Their past and present and future versions occupying the same space in ways that violated every law of physics. The affected ships imploded into points of light, so bright that sensors overloaded across the fleet. And when the light faded, there was nothing left but tiny black holes that pulled nearby vessels to their doom. 8 seconds had passed. "Get us out of here," Vexner commanded. "Emergency faster than light jump, any direction, now." His navigation officer's hands flew across the controls, but his face went pale as he stared at his readings. "The gravity drives are not responding." "Grand Admiral," he reported with despair in his voice, "something is blocking our ability to fold space." More human ships were appearing now, decloaking throughout the system in numbers that defied imagination. Where the sensors had shown empty space moments before, there were now thousands of vessels, each one radiating power signatures that dwarfed anything in the Xantharian fleet. Hexner finally understood the truth, and it crushed his soul. The humans had not been primitive at all. They had been hiding, watching, waiting for something stupid enough to threaten them. And now his fleet was going to pay the price for the Empire's arrogance. "Grand Admiral," Valsa whispered, "they are powering weapons, the orbital defense." Grid fired 10,000 beams of superheated plasma streaked through space at nearly the speed of light, each one drawing power from fusion reactors that burned with the fury of small suns. The beams hit the Xantharian shields, and those shields lasted less than a microsecond before they evaporated. Hulls that had been forged to withstand meteor impacts melted like ice in a furnace. Ships that had conquered worlds became expanding clouds of vapor and ash. The beams swept through the fleet with perfect precision, and wherever they touched, death followed. Fexener watched his tactical display as hundreds of ship indicators blinked out of existence every second. The Eternal Dominion shuddered as beams struck it from multiple directions, and warning alarms screamed throughout the bridge. Shields failing. Someone screamed, "Hull breach on decks 7 through 15. Another voice cried, "The reactor is going critical." Grand Admiral Lex looked around at his bridge crew, at the warriors who had followed him expecting easy victory, and he felt shame and regret and terror all mixed together in his final moments. He tried to think of a prayer, some words to offer to the gods his people had abandoned millennia ago. But there was no time. The Eternal Dominion exploded from within as its reactor lost containment, and Grand Admiral Vex died without ever understanding what had killed him. 14 seconds had passed when the 15th second arrived. There was nothing left of the Seventh subjugation fleet except expanding debris fields and the fading echoes of 847 ships that had been erased from existence. Not defeated, not destroyed, erased as if they had never existed at all. The human fleet held position throughout the system, silent and watchful, as search and rescue teams began scanning the debris for survivors. They found 66 survivors out of over 2 million Xantharian soldiers and crew members who had arrived expecting to conquer a primitive world. The battle was over, and humanity had proven to the galaxy that some prey should never be hunted. The silence that followed the battle was more terrifying than the violence itself. Commander Zelenix floated in the cramped escape pod and listened to the ragged breathing of the 3 crew members who had survived with him through the tiny viewport. He could see the remains of the 7th Fleet drifting through space, and he had to fight the urge to scream. 15 seconds. That was all it had taken for the humans to erase 847 warships and over 2 million of his people. He had been in the shielded cargo section of a troop carrier when the attack began, and the ship had been destroyed before he even knew what was happening. The emergency systems had launched his escape pod automatically, saving his life while everything he knew burned around him. "What happened?" whispered Ensign Thralka from beside him, her young face pale with shock. What could possibly have done this? Before Zelenix could answer, a human vessel appeared beside their pod, and he felt his heart stop beating for a moment. This is the end, he thought. They have come to finish what they started, but instead of weapons fire, a calm voice came through the pod's communication system. "Xantharian survivors. This is the United Earth Defense Command vessel Resolute," the voice said in perfect Xantharian. "We are here to rescue you, not harm you, and we are requesting permission to bring you aboard for medical treatment." Zelenix looked at his crewmates and saw the same confusion and fear that he felt reflected in their eyes. The humans had just annihilated an Imperial fleet, and now they wanted to save the survivors? "We accept," he said finally, because there was no other choice. The rescue operation was swift and efficient, and within an hour Zelenix and the other 3 survivors from his pod had been joined by 2 officers from a battlecruiser who had been in a protected section when their ship was hit. 6 survivors. Total 6 out of more than 2 million. They were taken to a medical facility on the human moon, and Zelenix could not stop staring at the technology that surrounded him. The equipment in this simple medical bay was more advanced than anything in the finest hospitals on Xanthar Prime. These were not primitives. These had never been primitives. 3 days later, when the survivors had recovered enough to speak, they were brought to a conference room where human officers waited with holographic displays. Director Chen herself was there, a small female with dark hair and eyes that held no warmth but also no cruelty. "I am sorry for the loss of your comrades," she said, and her voice carried what sounded like genuine regret. "This battle did not need to happen, and we take no pleasure in the deaths we caused." Zelenix felt rage building in his chest, but he forced it down because he knew that anger would accomplish nothing. "Why?" he asked, and the question contained 1,000 smaller questions. "Why did you hide what you were? And why did you let us come here, thinking we could conquer you?" Director Chun nodded slowly and activated the holographic display, which showed the battle from the human perspective. "Your empire has conquered thousands of worlds because those worlds were genuinely primitive," she explained. "They could not defend themselves, and so they fell before your fleets like grass before a blade. But humanity made a choice 40 years ago, when we discovered faster than light travel. And we decided to hide our true capabilities from the galaxy. We watched your scout probes arrive, and we let them see exactly what they expected to see, because we knew that someday your empire would send a fleet. And we wanted to make an example that would ensure no one ever threatened Earth again." The display showed the 15-second battle in slow motion, and Zelenix watched his fleet die frame by frame. "Your weapons," he said quietly. "What are they, and how is this possible?" "The technology we used against your fleet represents perhaps 5% of our actual defensive capabilities," Director Chun answered, and her words hit Zelenix like physical blows. "We did not need to reveal our full strength to defeat you, and we hope we never need to." The human officer leaned forward and spoke with intensity in her voice. "Commander Zelenix, we are going to give you a choice," she said. "You can remain here on Earth as refugees under our protection, or you can return to your empire with a message." "What message?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "The truth," Director Chun said simply. "We will give you a ship and full sensor recordings of the battle, along with technical specifications of the weapons we used. You will return to your emperor and show him exactly what happened here. And you will deliver our diplomatic communique." She handed him a data crystal that glowed faintly in the dim light of the conference room. "Earth is not available for conquest," she recited from memory. "Any future aggression will be met with the complete destruction of the aggressor's fleet. And if necessary, their homeworld. We do not wish war, but we will not tolerate subjugation. This is our first and final warning." Zelenix took the crystal and felt its weight in his palm. So small and yet containing the power to reshape galactic politics forever. "I will return," he said. "My emperor must know what happened here." 1 week later, the 6 survivors departed the Sol system in a small Xantharian courier ship that the humans had retrofitted with their own faster-than-light drives as they passed through the outer system. Zelenix looked through the viewports and counted the human warships that had decloaked to escort them out. He stopped counting at 2,000 because there were simply too many to track, and his sensors indicated that there were more in stealth mode, many more, watching silently as the tiny courier ship made its way toward the edge of human territory. The fleet that destroyed us was not their full strength. He realized with mounting horror. It was not even close. The journey home took only 4 days with the human drives. And Zelenix spent every moment of that time preparing himself to deliver news that would shake the foundations of his civilization when the courier ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel above Zenther Prime. The orbital defense platforms immediately surrounded it with weapons trained on its hull. "Unknown vessel. Identify yourself immediately," demanded a voice over the communication. Channel Zelenzaus activated his own transmitter and spoke the words that would change everything. "This is Commander Zelenix of the 7th Subjugation Fleet," he said. "I am one of 6 survivors, and I carry an urgent message for Emperor Vaxtulos. The conquest of Earth has failed. the Seventh Fleet has been destroyed. And I have come to warn the Empire that the humans are not what we thought they were. The silence that followed his transmission seemed to last forever. And Zelenics knew that the universe he had known was already beginning to crumble. The message would spread. The truth would spread, and nothing would ever be the same again. Emperor Vaxtulos XIII had ruled the Xantharian Empire for 300 years. And in all that time, he had never felt fear. He had felt triumph and satisfaction and sometimes boredom. But fear was an emotion for lesser beings and conquered peoples now. As he watched the holographic recording of his fleet being erased in 15 seconds, he learned what fear truly meant. The War Council sat in stunned silence around the crystal throne room, their scaled faces showing emotions that none of them had ever experienced in their long careers of conquest. "This cannot be real," whispered Admiral Crystal, his voice cracking with disbelief. "No species could possibly possess such weapons." "It is real," said Commander Zelenics, who stood before the council still wearing the simple clothes the humans had given him. "I was there, and I watched our mightiest warships dissolve like morning mist before the sun. The humans were never primitive. My Emperor," he continued with devastating honesty, "they were hiding, and they let us see only what they wanted us to see. Our scout probes detected exactly what they were meant to detect, and our fleet flew into a trap that had been prepared for 40 of their years." Emperor Vaxtulos raised one hand to silence the murmuring that had begun among his advisors. And when he spoke, his voice carried a weariness that none of them had ever heard before. "Chief Science Advisor Melrix," he said, "you have examined the technical data the humans provided. So tell me honestly, can we develop weapons to match theirs?" The old scientist shuffled forward with his head bowed and answered in a voice that trembled with professional humiliation. "My Emperor, based on my analysis, human technology operates on principles that we have not even begun to theorize about." He admitted, "Their quantum disruption weapons interact with matter at the subatomic level in ways our physics cannot explain. Their temporal minds create localized paradoxes that our mathematicians insist should be impossible. And their primary beam weapons draw power from fusion reactors that are at least 10 generations ahead of our best designs. To develop comparable capabilities would take our empire centuries of research, assuming we could even understand the fundamental principles involved." The weight of those words settled over the war council like a funeral shroud. "And if we were to send a larger fleet?" the Emperor asked, though he already knew the answer. The humans claim they used only 5% of their defensive capabilities against the Seventh Fleet. Melrix replied, "Even accounting for probable exaggeration, our entire Imperial armada would likely suffer the same fate." And their diplomatic message warned that any further aggression would result in the destruction of the aggressor's homeworld. "My Emperor, I believe they could do it, and I believe they would do it if we gave them reason." Emperor Vaxtulos closed his eyes and felt the foundations of his universe crumbling beneath him for 12,000 years. The Xantharian Empire had been the greatest power in the galaxy, and now they had found something they could not defeat. "Issue a decree," he commanded finally, "effective immediately. All Xantharian vessels are prohibited from entering human space without explicit human permission. A permanent exclusion zone is to be established around the Sol system, and any violation of this zone will be treated as treason against the Empire. We will not speak of war with the humans again." The War Council bowed in acceptance, and Zelenics felt a strange mixture of relief and sorrow-relief that his people would not throw themselves against human defenses in a suicidal war of pride-sorrow that the Empire he had served his whole life had been humbled so completely in the weeks that followed. News of the Seventh Fleet's destruction spread across the galaxy at faster than light speeds. The Cathresh collective heard and withdrew their ships from Human trade routes they had been planning to raid the Valdoon Harmony sent diplomatic envoys to Earth almost immediately, bearing gifts and offers of alliance. The Schlaran Federation opened communication channels that had been closed since first contact. Suddenly eager to establish relations with these humans they had previously dismissed as primitives and among the conquered peoples of the Xantharian Empire. Whispers began if the mighty Xanthar could be humbled by a single species from an unremarkable star system, then perhaps their chains were not as unbreakable as they had believed 6 months after the battle. Earth hosted its first official diplomatic summit at a space station the humans had constructed at a point between their world and their moon director. Chun welcomed representatives from 15 different species, and she smiled as she watched them studying the station with barely hidden awe. "Thank you all for coming," she said in her opening address. "Humanity has spent a long time hiding from the galaxy, and now we are ready to emerge and take our place among the stars. We come in peace, and we offer friendship and cooperation to any species that approaches us with similar intentions. We offer medical technology that can cure diseases your peoples thought incurable, and we offer clean energy systems that can power civilizations without destroying their worlds. We offer trade and cultural exchange and the opportunity to build something better together. But let me also be clear about what we do not offer." Her smile faded, and her voice took on an edge of steel. "We do not offer ourselves as subjects or slaves or conquests, and we will defend our home against any threat with all the power at our disposal." The 7th Xantharian Fleet learned this lesson, and we hope that no other civilization will need to learn it the same way. The alien ambassadors nodded quickly, for they had all seen the recordings, and none of them wanted to test human resolve 1 year after the battle. Director Chun stood on the observation deck of UEDC headquarters and looked up at the night sky over Earth. The stars burned with the same light they had always burned with, but their meaning had changed forever out there. Empires were shifting their borders away from human space out there. Oppressed peoples were beginning to dream of freedom out there. The galaxy was learning a new truth about the universe. Somewhere in that vast darkness, there existed a species that had weaponized patience itself, species that had worn the mask of helplessness while building, weapons that could erase fleets from existence, a species that did not conquer, but absolutely refused to be conquered. "Director Chun," said Admiral Morrison as he approached from behind. "The Valdoon ambassador is asking to discuss expanded trade agreements." Sarah Chun smiled and turned away from the stars. "Tell them I will be there shortly," she said. "The future is not going to build itself, and we have a lot of work to do." She walked toward the conference room where humanity's new chapter was being written, one tree at a time behind her. The stars continued to burn, indifferent and eternal, but they were no longer quite so dark, because somewhere among them, Earth was shining, and the galaxy had learned that some light should never be threatened, because the small blue world in the Orion Spur was not prey, it was the most dangerous predator the universe had ever seen, and it was finally awake.